Hello. 1986 feels like a weird year, a between and betwixt year. The eye of the 80s hurricane, strangely calm, frozen almost. Hip-hop was knocking at the door but not quite breaking it down. Acid house and the rave explosion was still a year or two away. Stock, Aiken and Waterman were gearing up the production line, readying for their end-of-the-decade chart blitzkrieg. And post-punk had splintered and seeded the indie, the alternative, the industrial and the goth scenes. And the studio technology and tricks of the first half of the decade had been brutally weaponized into by-the-numbers formality. Sampled drums, fairlight orchestras, gated, reverbed, plastic hugeness. Yet from this perspective, 1986 feels like a very Patrick Bateman kind of year. Slick, soulless, empty behind the eyes. Huey Lewis, Invisible Touch, Kenny Loggins, Peter Cetera, Clapton's August album. In fact, a 2015 study analysing the musical properties of 17,000 songs covering the US charts between 1958 and 2012 identified 1986 as the most repetitive year in pop music. I'm putting 1986 down here, but it's not without its share of gems. Here are a few that I considered, but that didn't quite make the cut this time round. First, a pair of big names with equally huge albums this year. Peter Gabriel's So and Paul Simon's Graceland. Huge critical and commercial successes for solo artists who, until this point, hadn't quite been able to shake off, I think, their past associations. Also, the Pet Shop Boys and their debut album, Please. West End Girls, Opportunities, Suburbia, Love Comes Quickly. A great album still, I think, and the most enduring of the second wave synth pop acts, without question. And while we're on synthesizers, Talk were putting theirs back in the box for their pivotal third album, The Colour of Spring, a sweet spot between their pop origins and their experimental future. They may have got deeper, more adventurous maybe, more interesting after this one, but it's an irresistible record nonetheless. Oh, and the Smiths, of course, dropped The Queen is Dead this year. Is it their best? Decide for yourself. But retrospectively, at least, it seems to have grown in stature with the passing of the years. It very skillfully mixes the misery with the wayward flippancy, the kitchen sink wit of Morrissey, and the supple, increasingly fiery jangle of the rest of the band. There Is a Light That Never Goes Out was mine and my wife's choice for our first dance wedding song. So clearly, it means something to me. But my choice for this year, I'm going to have to unpick this one a little for you. As you know from previous videos, I think musical evolution is very much like actual evolution, punctuated equilibria. It's not a smooth, even process, but the odd seismic upheaval interspersed with periods of relative stability. This year's album is the culmination for me of one of those long periods of stability. And rather than discovering this artist via singles or TV appearances or word of mouth, this was someone I found through stories, through reading, from one of the other great obsessions of my teenage years. Picture this, one summer holiday, 84 maybe, a static caravan somewhere in West Wales. I'm dodging the rain. I'm desperate for something to do. I drifted past the racks of DC Comics in the campsite shop and found myself drawn to the carousel of paperbacks near the entrance. And there I picked up this. This is Night Shift, a collection of short stories by Stephen King. And I loved it. So much so that over the intervening couple of years, I accumulated pretty much everything I could find by him. You should be looking at my collection here. Pretty much all of his 70s and 80s novels, short stories, Salem's Lot, The Shining, Christine, The Stand. I devoured the lot. He was my other escape. Epic stories of downtrodden blue-collar guys, sometimes girls, often kids, staring down cosmic terrors and unspeakable evil in an impossibly exotic, to me, version of small-town America. They were a lifeline, a world of excitement and danger with heroes and villains that were honest, relatable, flawed, I read them all. I reread my favourites. I escaped night after night. And 1986 was probably peak King in pop cultural terms, and for me personally, with the release of his classic novel, It. Overlong, bloated, but engrossing, terrifying, and with enough resonance to carry it way into the 21st century via TV and movie adaptations. So you're probably asking yourself, where does music come into this? Well, avid readers of Stephen King will know him as an unreconstructed rock and roller. Many, many references throughout his work, via songs featuring in the stories themselves, or lyrical lifts, quotes to introduce chapters. Creedence, the Stones, Dylan, Neil Young, the Ramones, the Pistols, Blue Oyster Cult, Screamin' Jay Hawkins, Hendrix, Buddy Holly. His writing is wet through with musical shout-outs, callbacks, and scene setters. And one of those artists stuck out immediately, popping up time and time again, as much a part of King's universe as Castle Rock, or Derry, or the Overlook Hotel. I actually dropped a question about this guy back in my 1982 video, but none of you followed up on that one. So repeating myself, I'll ask you again. How do we all feel about The Boss? Because my choice for 1986, an entirely self-indulgent one, I'll admit, is Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, live 1975 to 85. Probably the only box set to feature on this list, and definitely the only live album. This was a huge deal to me. And to the legion of Bruce fans out there, releasing in November of 1986, just in time for Christmas. 5 LPs, or as in the case of mine, 3 cassettes or CDs. This was the live set that Springsteen had always promised to release. Career spanning, covering the clubs to the arenas, and packing in a runtime approaching 4 hours that would give one of his marathon live shows a run for its money. It also served as a useful stopgap, a bit of a breather after the year and a half he and the band had spent on the road through 84, 85, supporting the immensely successful Born in the USA album, by some distance his biggest seller, almost 30 million copies worldwide. And for me, the owner already of several of his studio albums up to that point, this was as close as I was ever going to get to seeing him live at this time in my life. So I asked for this album for Christmas. It was my big present. I remember sweating a little in the run-up to Christmas that year. BBC News had run a feature about all advance order records being broken in the States, and some fans expecting to miss out in the rush. But my local Woolies came through, and the box set sat there, all wrapped up and waiting for me on Christmas morning. This was not my first live album. That would be U2's Under a Blood Red Sky. But this was all a bit overwhelming at first. The good stuff, I mean, the earliest cut here, the opener, Thunder Road from the Roxy back in October 1975, is one of the great recordings of this song, stripped back to piano, glockenspiel, harmonica, and Bruce. It's a version you need to have. It's magical. There are some lovely covers on here, a few treats like Eddie Floyd's Raise Your Hand, which finds the E Street Band in their happy place, soulful, Stax-flavoured, good time rock and roll. It may come across a little Blues Brothers, but go with it. The crowd interplay is wonderful. A version of Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Hand sits shoulder high with some lovely cuts from Nebraska. The title track, Johnny 99, Reason to Believe, from an album that was never toured in its own right and only found a place in the live set on the Born in the USA tour. You get Edwin Starr's War, Bruce's storming version of Because the Night, the song he gave to Patti Smith, and a hometown crowd pleaser in 1981's take on Tom Waits' Jersey Girl at the Meadowlands Arena in the Garden State itself. But the meat and potatoes for me was the chance to hear the songs from my favourite albums, back from Darkness on the Edge of Town, The River, and yes, Born in the USA. That huge adrenalised rock and soul review feel, Springsteen able to make an audience dance and twirl like puppets. Yeah, just one of the great live performers of our time. I finally got to see him in 2008 at the then Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. Let me tell you, you roll up in Wales, 60,000 fans, packed in, and you start up The River, and you sing, I come from down in the valley where Mr. when you're young. They bring you up to do just like your daddy done. And, well, listen to the crowd, steady yourself, keep it together. The man knows his audience and makes them as much a part of the show as his band, as himself. But back to the box. Are there any disappointments? The soundboard quality isn't on point for every track here, but it's not enough to spoil the experience. But give me a break. 10 years of live recordings and no Jungle Land? That's the fan speaking. And the Bruce fan in me doesn't get to stretch his legs too much nowadays. I'd stick with Bruce for the rest of the 80s, but, you know, new discoveries, new paths. They tend to lead you elsewhere to push out the old, at least for a while. And I know for some, Bruce is just too much. The rock and roll, the brazen spectacle, millimeters away from Meatloaf, so many. Maybe. But if you're looking to escape, who better to bust out with than the Boss? So that was 1986. Bit of an unexpected one maybe, but, you know, Stephen King and Bruce Springsteen, they just go together so well, and they were both such a big deal to me at that time in my life that I felt I had to do it justice for this year at least. I know he's not for everyone, but yeah, please let me know down below. What do you think of the Boss? So if you've stuck this far with me today, particularly through all those non-musical diversions, thanks very much for watching. Please think about giving this video a thumbs up, and why not subscribe if you haven't done so already. But I am done for today. Yeah, I hope to see you again soon. Please take care, and bye for now.